That equals, so that's 7,800 cups, that's 488 gallons, let's just say 500 gallons. So if you're getting 500 gallons, you're using 5-gallon Alhambra jugs, that's more than it's going to fit in this room right now. So I say, and the governor says, we're going to make this change. Let's change this water thing. Now, I got to tell you, I spent the last 10 days wrestling waiters and back waiters. Well, can we just leave the bottle on the table? No, you can't leave the bottle on the table. And then I come in yesterday, and they decided after I had made the decision to put all the water glasses back, just in case someone else would put the water glasses out. Water glasses off the table. You're not getting it, right? I want to make an impact. And besides that, when I tried to explain to them, someone might order an iced tea instead of drinking water at lunch, and you just upped your sale by $3, right? How many times a week is that going to happen? Look at the end of the year, I do the same thing with them. So today, if you go into my restaurant, you won't see a water glass, and you will be asked if they can get you any beverage. No, the water is free. And also my sparkling water is free. Oh, by the way, I saved money not even selling all that other bottled water. It's crazy. Now we're giving it away free and we're still ahead. It was so stupid. But the other thing that I've been wrestling with, my husband's got someplace, and my husband and I were traveling someplace, and I think it was someplace crazy like Seattle, and why on earth would they be thinking of water conservation up there? But they're good folks, so they always are. So we're in a restaurant. If any of you have ever eaten in my restaurant at dinner, I am telling you, you are 7 to 9 pieces of silverware. Yeah. And they're going to drive you crazy replacing it, dodging around you to do it. So what we saw some kind of little dish, something. I just finally, last week, I was trying to get the glass guy at the farmer's market to make me something special. I thought I'd help him make some money, but being an artist, this didn't work after almost a year. So I went out last week to Home Depot and I bought these tiles that come and I pulled them all off. So at each place setting, the people are like, what's that for? You know, we're conserving water, and we want to do our part, and we want, if you would like to reuse your silverware for any other course, instead of us replacing it, please just put your utensil there and we won't pick it up. You know about you guys, but if I butter my bread, I can cut my asparagus with this same And I also have an issue, and this is total service, and I'm off of this, but if you notice it, so at a really good high-end service restaurant, I went to one in Chicago, and I had to go back 3 times because it took me the second time before I could figure out what they were doing, and the third time just to enjoy myself. And the thing that restaurant does is they wait until someone needs to come to the table for something, and then they all come from every which way. The back waiter's coming for this, and someone hits the table with that. So when they're putting your entree down, you don't notice that person is filling your water, you don't know that they refolded something, and then they all leave. So I might only have 4 to 5 visits to my table all night. I'm going to tell you, there are some nights, even in my own restaurant, but certainly in many fine dining restaurants, I don't want to see your face anymore. It's been 11 times you've been to my table. I want to finish a sentence completely without a busboy filling the last 2 inches of my water up because they need to look busy on the floor. They can't go hide anywhere. There's nowhere for them to sit until they're needed. It's not how it works. If you can't dust it, fill it. And so, and it's really their job for 5 or 6 hours, right? When the show is on. So that is going to be such a big cultural change, and I'm making the commitment. My husband makes the commitment. So, oh, by the way, the old-fashioned thing that we already did, that we've been doing for 9 years, is if you're also in my restaurant, you see a busboy grab the water and then flick it into the garden. They're supposed to do that. Okay? That is how we water those pots in the garden. We also, by our back door, when you go out to the patio, sometimes you will see a bucket of water, a white bucket of water, and housekeeping did not forget to put it away. That is the same thing as maybe he's not pitching that, they're pouring it into that bucket of water, and then that's going to go into the pots in a bigger way. Maybe they can't pitch because there's people sitting there. Also, next to my dish station, where people bring in the dirty dishes for the dishwasher to pick them up, there is a bucket there, but there's also the bucket that the silverware goes into. Soaking and dishwashing takes up a lot of product. So what we do is we use that water excess. It just If they are not out by a bucket, they can throw it into that. It soaks the silverware and it gives it a pre-soak, and then it's much faster going through the dish machine. It doesn't use it. We have converted in our housekeeping to a non-water, let's see, it has water in it, so what would you call this? It's a non-rinse product. So normally housekeeping would get the mop and bucket and the soap and the bleach, and she goes through the whole place and she mops it, and then she puts fresh water in there, maybe twice to go through. We have old concrete floors. This building is really old. It's concrete, but I'm telling you, it's the cleanest concrete you've ever seen because she's so thorough about it. For us to tell her, no, this product, you only wash the floor. You don't go back and rinse it, and that is also going to be a really hard lesson for me to teach our staff. I see that Rayleigh's is using the same product I saw in the news last week. They're doing stainless steel. They're doing their entire kitchens. I'm not quite ready to do that yet. There's still something about me that loves a good bleach smell in the morning. So I will continue watching that product. And we also, with our people that we buy our soap supplies from, we make them recycle their bottles, and we won't use any of their products that aren't in recyclables, and we know that we've inspired some change within that industry of what they're producing now. And we're really happy about that. Let me see if there's, oh, this is another one that gets me every single day. This is a restaurant, let's see, it's a dirty little habit, is the only way I can say it, is that there sometimes some chefs can be lazy. And out of habit of many, many years, they will put a frozen, they will take a frozen item, if they have a freezer item that needs to be thawed that day, and they will put it in the sink, and they'll put lukewarm water to run on it sometimes, drip on it. It might be have ice around it, and they're dripping into the ice to get that temperature eventually. That's what they do with hot things to get them cold. But they'll put their things in there and they'll warm it with warm water. And it's in a bucket or it's in a bag, however it comes. But it drives me crazy because all you're telling me is that you were too lazy to know what you were going to do today for lunch, and you didn't get your product out last night, or you didn't get your order in, and now you're seeing if there's anything good in the freezer that you need to use today. So that's usually a first sign red flag for me when they're doing that. So I have a new chef. I'm loving this guy. He's been here a couple of months, and he apparently has gotten my reputation before I've had a chance to really build a relationship with him. But that's okay because I'm liking him already. He solved the problem, and it's funny, I said, oh yeah, you did, that's really good, and then I'll talk to him later about this, is they're using a cryovac. So they're using what you use to sous vide food, circulating mild temperature water around this bag to thaw something in a good time frame. I still think in a walk-in, in a bus tub, slowly over 14, 15 hours is perfect, but that would be in the perfect world. But if they had to rush it, so the part that I said I'm going to surprise him with later is I'm going to ask him what's he doing with his water? Because now you still are using a gallon of water in a cryovac. So how many uses are you planning? Do you need something else with that water after you've thawed this bag? Is there something else that can go in there? What is your plan with this water? And so we'll have that conversation because it's always about education. And I find that we've really had to educate. Sometimes I look and I think, God, we're restaurateurs. But the good thing about it is we have the opportunity to educate people about the things that we do know about, right? About, particularly when it comes about sustainability, it's what we pay our mortgage and a few other mortgages on. And so I'm being a bit extremist probably for any restaurant in town. I've heard my other restaurant friends going, I'm not going to bother with that, or they can't tell me that. And it's like, the waiters will be fined, not the restaurant. The waiters will be fined if they overpour or ask, would you like water? And so I'm just scaring the children right now, and I'm telling them that I'm not covering the fees. So these little kind of drastic ways, it's getting people to talk about it. You're gonna wonder, did you wonder, did they tell you what it was about?
Patrick came and explained it to me.
Yeah. So this week I've been educating all my staff, and hopefully they get the opportunity to talk to 250 people a day. And they're going to be able to make them think that they need to be inspired to save a little here and there. 500 gallons, right? So I worked at the convention center for 9 years. Water was such a big issue. We had a problem with water. People want water for 2,000 people. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of hauling, you guys. A lot of hauling. When we do Valley Vision for 300 people in the middle of something that doesn't have a kitchen, doesn't have anything, I have to all bring it in Alhambra. So I need to know how much do I need for the water, how much do I need for the kitchen, and I need to haul water all the time. So, you know, you get 125 4-ounce drinks or so out of a 5-gallon Alhambra thing, right? I mean, there's all these calculations that you use, and when you actually multiply that out, then people get a bigger, better picture than when I tell you we're using 500 gallons at this, what 105-gallon buckets look like. If you had to move them from here to a truck, that even gives you a better impact of what that is. That's all I really have. So thanks so much for letting us share and including us in the conversation.
Oh, thank you, Bobbin. Not only modeling good behavior for us, you're putting new practices in place and very entertaining. Our final speaker is Malinda Matson. We're so grateful that she's joining us today. She's the Economic Development Representative for Northern and Coastal California at the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. That is a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
And so we had invited her to come here speak to us from a federal perspective and sharing with some of her on-the-ground experience and key learnings from natural disasters in other parts of the country. So please join me in welcoming Malinda.
I'm lazy, I want to say. So, this is all very exciting. I'm so glad that the Valley Vision is doing this initiative. So, from our perspective, and I'll go back to Hurricane Katrina. The federal government did not do well at Hurricane Katrina. I think we all know that. And afterwards, there was a big initiative on the federal level, and that's what the National NDRF, National Disaster Recovery Framework, and there's a ton of abbreviations and acronyms and all of that in it. But basically, FEMA and all of its federal partners got together and looked at what happens in a major disaster, and we know that we're getting more and more of them. And so there's, if you look at this they call it the 3-hump camel down here at the bottom. You'll see the cycle of disasters. As somebody said, it's not if we're going to get a disaster. In our world, it's when are we going to get a disaster. And in our world, we are beginning disaster season. So it's tornadoes, it's hurricanes, it's floods, it's fires. We are there. We will see how this year goes. So the cycle is we have preparedness, and then we have the 3 phases of recovery. We have short-term, intermediate, and long-term recovery. And so those are like activities that relate to the recovery process. Okay. The one good thing about a big disaster, as far as helping with recovery, is that when FEMA comes into your town after a big disaster, there's something called the FEMA factor. And they will bring hundreds of people, and they will bring lots of money, and they will fill your hotels, and they will go to all of your restaurants, and you will have that short-term economic boost simply because FEMA's there. People that have lost their homes, FEMA will put them in hotels. They will pay them, they will pay for their meals at restaurants. It's an initial, that's that first hump there. And anyway, but that's not sustainability. That's just one of those things, it's kind of a shot in the arm after a disaster. Oh, I guess I'm the one with the magic button here. Okay. So in looking at the cycle of disasters, we hopefully are preparing for disasters, which makes us more resilient. We have an event, and then we have the phases of recovery. And for us at the Economic Development Administration, we know there is no recovery until your business community has recovered, and your jobs are back, and people are working and paying their bills, and all the economic activity is going forward. So economic recovery drives regular, all phases of recovery, and when we're sitting in a big, FEMA room and we're talking after a disaster, it is economic recovery that drives what roads get rebuilt fastest, what power lines come back on, who's calling the telecommunication companies to get poles back up so we can have self-service, so we can have the internet. All of those things is getting business, well, first life-saving, and then as soon as the immediate response is done, it's into getting things back to normal. And it's all around economic recovery, including housing and so forth. So I have a question for you. What is one of the most important business sectors to get back online after a major disaster? Anybody want to take a guess? What?
Grocery store.
Groceries important.
Communication.
What?
Communication.
Telecommunications actually comes back in response. So in the recovery process, what's one of the first businesses you want to get back online? Banking is a response recovery because you have to have cash.
Building supplies.
Building supplies, very important. What's more important than that?
Energy.
Gas station.
Daycare.
Yeah.
I kid you not, if you don't have a place to send your kids that's safe, so getting daycares back open and parents accepting that their kids are in a safe place, things don't happen. So that's one of the things that we have learned. And we did not expect that. So, yeah, it's, anyway. So, communities that have high business resilience are going to get back to that steady state of economic growth faster than communities that have some resilience or have none. And we unfortunately have learned this by going through the Katrinas, the Ritas, the Sandys, all of those things. And for those of us that have worked in disaster recovery, for some of us it's an easier learning process than others. I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma, and then I lived in the Pacific for 15 years and have seen more typhoons than New Orleans has seen hurricanes in the last 20 years. So for some of us, preparedness, recovery, they're just parts of life. And those are things that you get used to. You would think living on a tropical island that water would be plentiful. Actually, that's where some of the scarcest water. Some places don't even have 24-hour water. So you really learn how to conserve water, drinkable water. So it's really all about, for us, as we have learned how to respond to disasters, how to recover from disasters, it's really, the bottom line is being prepared for those disasters. The better prepared you are, the quicker you bounce back. And this really relates to all kinds of things. Your building code, your how you think about water, how you think about what you're going to need afterwards, where you store your data. It's all about flashlights and just, you name it. Having all the contact numbers for your employees, or your friends, or your family. It's doing head counts. I worked disaster recovery in Moore. I was able to go back after the big tornadoes a few years ago. And the businesses that were back the quickest were the banks, because especially banks that have a national affiliation have a plan. The sirens go off, everybody goes in the vault. They come out, and there was a few banks in Moore that they came out of the vault and the bank wasn't there anymore. But they have protocols, what they do with cash, what they don't. I mean, it's the telecommunication companies have protocols. What happens? Storm comes through, knocks down all the cell towers. They have in their warehouses portable cell towers that they put up. It's also what, in some ways, the fire and police and everybody uses to communicate. We learned that in 9/11. So bigger organizations are better. One, I have to tell you an interesting story. One of the best organizations, businesses, in the country for disaster recovery, not only because they are back on their feet, but they are there. They frequently beat FEMA, and that's Walmart. Walmart shows up with trucks full of water and food and blankets. I mean, they're just there. So I just moved to Vacaville. I was in a Walmart. I was looking at some things. They were having a little staff meeting. And I had to laugh. It was, for me, it was amusing. So the manager said, they go, okay, we got the report from the Napa store this morning. These are the things they learned from the earthquake. And this is how we are going to change things.
Wow.
I was like, because that means in another earthquake, if it hits Vacaville, they are going to be back open. And they are going to have food and water and the things that are needed to get the community back going. So Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, they have plans, they put them in place, they actually practice. It's those small businesses that Meg points out that that's where we need to focus. When we go in for disaster recovery, that's our focus. Small businesses. Do they need microloans? Do they need, what kind of assistance do they need? How can we pull it together? And we work with our federal partners, we work with our local stakeholders, and that's our goal, is to get those small businesses back online. One of our biggest partners are chambers of commerce. So when we have a disaster, we're on the phone, calling the executive director going, okay, here's what we need to do. So that's what happens in a big disaster. But what we want is that to be more automatic, to be that blue line, so that the business community can come back and get back to normal. And it also helps avoid some loss of life, some, the worst things about the disasters. We're going to get more Sandys. We had tornado warnings here in California the other day. I actually got to see the snow in Mount Shasta. Yeah. I don't think California's ready for a touchdown for a tornado. And hopefully you never will. But it's one of the things that, if it happens, we need to learn how to be prepared for it. And you can actually build now to be more tornado resistant, just like you can be more hurricane or typhoon resistant. So it's one of those things. We hope we don't have to show up and do disaster recovery. I like doing regular economic development and not, recovery stuff. It's not as much fun at all. So. That's really it, that's all I have.
Thanks, Malinda. We're going to open it up to some questions. I'm actually going to build off you for a little bit. So I went to school at Tulane University in New Orleans before Katrina. And after Katrina, I remember sitting in my queue at Motorola, watching it all go down. But for us, what was amazing is the president of Tulane University watching it from that angle of the recovery, because it is a major employer. First priority was getting students relocated to other schools, but only for a semester because we wanted them to come back, right?
Right.
But next was all the teachers saying, our priority today is to get you all set up in direct deposit, because not everyone was direct deposit, right? And they said, I know you need cash now more than ever. But then later, when they wanted everyone to come back, just like you said, those teachers had families, and the public schools weren't open yet because a lot of them, there wasn't the housing. So they worked with the city to bring in cruise ships. That's where people lived until their housing was back up. I mean, it was just very innovative. But I can imagine they put some new practices in place of mandatory, say, everyone's on direct deposit or other things, because it'll happen again. And we had a scare when I was there, and I'm just grateful I wasn't there during Katrina. My father was also grateful that I wasn't there. So any questions? Yes?
I had a question about the toolkit. It sounds like it's really focused on the businesses and each small business getting prepared. But I was wondering if there was any element to it looking at the regional plans, like what you had mentioned beyond the four walls, that you, like the roads and that regional infrastructure. So are there components where there are either recommendations for how the region can be more resilient as a whole?
You know, there are so many, okay, now I'm gonna stutter for a while. What we primarily do in the toolkit is encourage and provide the mechanisms for small businesses to interact directly with their local jurisdictions and the folks who are there as professionals in the public sector doing that planning, which is both at the state level and at the county and at the city level. There are folks who rightly spend their professional lives in emergency planning within the public sector. And in the course of this project, it's a little outside of our area of expertise to make those recommendations on behalf of the project directly to these jurisdictional planners. I think hearing directly from small businesses into that process is a much more direct set of feedback into the public sector. So that's really what we're trying to encourage, is that dialogue and that conversation.
So I can kind of answer your question. We actually had a very mild disaster season last year. And so instead of having, thousands of FEMA employees and all of the other of us that do, and for EDA, we all do now disaster recovery or resilience in some aspect. It's a big priority for us. So we can get back to that steady state faster. But we have just completed in the Bay Area an earthquake recovery plan. And so we actually went through all the federal partners and the state partners, going through and looking at, okay, so here's all of our roads. If this happens, it's sort of like getting an idea of if the Bay Bridge goes down again, what are we going to do? Where are we going to send people? What's first priority, second priority? So that the public works folks can actually go out there and begin, getting things operational again. So there's a lot of looking at that in the systems and so forth. And I think the next process with FEMA is going to be looking at the Sacramento region. I don't know for sure, but I think that's
So was that a result of EDA's work plan that's already been determined, or did someone from the Bay Area get a grant to work with EDA to do this type of
No, that was
plan?
actually FEMA.
Oh,
that was
okay.
actually FEMA that led that. FEMA's in charge of the National Disaster Recovery Framework. And so instead of having to figure this stuff out after a major disaster, because we had a fairly mild season last year, it was, okay, we're going to do a lot of this strategizing and preparing so that we know that there's going to be another earthquake at some time. What are we going to do? How are we going to be prepared? And FEMA they drive me crazy. Okay, there's a book, it's called the FAT book, abbreviations and acronyms. So if you're not used to working with FEMA, you actually have to have the book with you. Figure out what they're talking about. But, and they meet constantly. And 3 and 4 hours at a time. If you've ever been on a 3-hour conference call, you have to have lots of caffeine. But it's, it is them trying to do their job better and be better prepared. So yeah, definitely Los Angeles needs to do it, Sacramento needs to do it with the issues that are here. In some ways, this is one of the problems with the federal government. And I think my friend here that works for the Congresswoman can understand this. So drought is a USDA disaster. Fireflies are often, fires are a Forest Service disaster, unless, so we try to do coordination and break down a lot of those silos so that we're working together. But it's, yeah, there's always more that the federal government can do, but one of our mantras in disaster recovery is we facilitate recovery, we do not drive recovery. So our recovery efforts are to help the local community make those decisions and be the master of their own recovery. So meetings like this are so important to me because that means that you're already on top of things for the next disaster. And again, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Talking about it in advance is what makes the difference. And doing something, not just talking, but doing something about it.
From the state perspective, so I understood your question. You're asking about local and regional guides for resilience, and the state has produced, the California Natural Resource Agency and Cal OES produced an adaptation planning guide, which is a 4-part document that helps local governments create adaptation action plans. There's also caladapt.org, which is a visual tool to understand climate threats at a local scale. And you can also find sector-specific recommendations in the Safeguarding California plan. If you're looking for resources, the state has a wide variety, and hopefully we'll be communicating those better so local and regional partners know more about this. But feel free to talk to me if you're looking for more advice.
Meg, I was wondering if you have plans to reach out to insurance agents and CPAs, because small businesses won't take the time. It's hard to push it up to the top of the priority list to sit down and do this planning. But if your accountant or your insurance guy says it's time to do our annual review, and oh, by the way, here's this, let's go through it and fill it out and think about it. That might be a way to reach.
Yes, absolutely. We haven't actually pursued the insurance agent or CPA angle directly yet, but we're certainly talking with banks and their small business lending groups because they have a vested interest. They have some risk there with their client base if they've got lines of credit out to folks who are suddenly somewhat